So this is a continuation of the previous slide. You can see that I've got the laptop PC and the switch with the cabling from the previous video. So again, this is our switch prompt, so you can see that this is a switch. That's not a useful naming convention, so one of the things that we got to really understand is, like, when you go in and you configure something, give it a name. So operating systems included. If you've installed Windows before, or if you haven't, when you got a Windows machine and you bring it online, it gets a default name like desktop dash and then some gobbledygook. That's not a real good identifier of where that machine sits, which office is using it, what building is in. It gives us no detail. So we need to have a corporate policy that identifies how we want things to be named. To make changes to a switch, we have to change between modes. So if we do an actual question mark right here, so question mark is used for help. So you can see that when I type that, I get some results kicked back. So I see connect, open a terminal connection. Disable, turn off privileged commands. Disconnect the network connection. Enable, turn on privilege mode. So this is what we're going to use to get into admin mode. Exit, so that'll kick us out of the menu that we're in. Log out, again, will kick us out of the menu. Resume on active network. Ping. Telnet. So without logging in, so if we have console open and somebody plugs a console cable in and we haven't done any configuration, if this thing was on a network, you can actually do a ping command. So if I type ping and press question, it comes back and tells us what information that we need to give it. So if you do ping space a IP address or a host name, so if we do host name, just so you know, it means we got to have domain name translation configured, which is DNS, because without DNS, we can't translate names. It doesn't work. So the same commands that we can use in DOS, we can use inside of Packet Tracer. Another one would be traceroute. And we can do this as users. So when you see the caret, we're in as a non-privileged user with limited things. So what's that mean? It means I cannot make live changes to the way that the switch is configured or it functions or operates. I can't reboot it. So we type command reload. It's like, what are you talking about? Control-Shift-6 stops that when we have name lookup on and the command's not recognized by the device. You're going to get an error. It's going to take a minute to come back. So if you don't want to wait, Control-Shift-6 would be the keystroke that you use to get past that problem. Again, you may see that on the test. So we don't have any IP addresses or anything, so I'm not going to run those commands, but those commands are used for testing connections and where connections get to. So to be able to do anything in a Cisco switch or device, we have to do enable. When we press enable, you can see that the prompt changes. So we're now on a new mode. So switch with a caret, user mode. Switch with a pound, it's privileged or exec mode. So we're in exec mode, and if we do question, if you remember before, we saw like a page of information. Now when we do it, you can see there's like a whole couple of pages. So now we got a new feature called clear. We got clock. So clock is a command that you're going to want to learn because we need to know how to set the system clock on our devices. We want to make sure we have accurate time so we can identify when people are logging in and logging out, making changes to the device. We can configure now. We're admins. We're in enable privileged. So configure is used to configure this device. We can copy things. We can delete. We can do dir. So if you've done anything in DOS, dir works the same as it does in Windows. It's actually an alias in Linux, because in Linux we use something called ls. But when we type dir, we can get a list of files inside of Flash, for example. We've already done the enable command. We can erase something. We can exit. We can log out. we can ping. Reload is your reboot, so you can halt and perform a cold restart. So if we wanted to restart a piece of Cisco equipment, you have to get to enable mode, and then you would type a command called reload. We can type setup. This is a non almost brainless version of configuration. So when you type setup, it'll actually walk through and ask you for the host name, how you want to do port 1, do you want to bring it up, shut it down, do you want to put an IP address on the switch, things of that nature. SSH is a client in this situation, so you can actually use a switch or other Cisco device and SSH or make a terminal connection to another remote device. So I don't have to leave the switch to get in the router. I can use the switch to jump onto it. And I'll show you that. There's also a telnet client, but we don't use that because it's not secure. We can configure VLAN. We can write something. Alright, so you can see there's a lot more commands. I'll get into. So to configure this device, we actually enter command configure terminal, which means I want to configure this thing by hand from a terminal. And again, you can see I switch into a config terminal mode. So in the default, or what we call global config, that's where we're at right now, noted by the prompt. It's going to look like this. Make sure you guys know these different prompts so you can answer those questions on the test. So in this mode, we can start entering commands to configure the switch. All right, I'm gonna stop it right here, and then we'll restart on the switch configuration. So the things to note is to make sure that you understand the question mark. So I can actually press question, and it shows me a whole new list of things that I can enter at the config mode prompt. You can see that if I type user and press question, it's going to show me all the commands that start with user. If I do US question or U question, so there's only one U command and it's user. What if I did S? You can see there's a bunch of them. So a letter and a question or a word, so you can see if I add SE, now it keys in. SP keys in. So once you get to where you only have one command, in this case spanning tree, you can also press tab and it'll complete that command for you. So instead of typing spanning tree, if I know, I can press tab, it'll complete it. But a letter and a question next to each other shows you the list of commands that start with that character, but you can use more than one character to narrow down your search so you don't get as much feedback or noise.